This video is going to talk about managing the patient questions for an event. So each event may have 1 to 5 to 100 different questions. They may be different questions for each event. Typically, you will come up with a set of questions that you want at all your events, and then occasionally add or remove a question depending on the needs for that local community where you have an event. All right, so the way you get to this control page is click on Admin and then Patient Questions, and then only administrators can see this page. So most of your users cannot see or modify your question definitions. All right, so we are going to first look at the variables here that you need. And this first column here is it's called the variable name. So each question you'll give a variable name to, and this variable will be used for your reporting. So it will say ethnicity or lang or general health. It's usually a little abbreviation, so in your reports you can tell what the question was. It'll give you answer counts and breakdowns, and there's a lot of different ways you can look at the question data. The next one is is it in this event? So you've got all these questions in the database, but which ones do you actually want to use? So you will select your event and then define which questions you want in that event. Now typically when you're defining an event, you're saying copy the standard set of questions. So you're not actually going through this to define each of your events. But you can go back and even during a clinic change the questions that are being asked. The next column is this question required? Do they have to have an answer for this, or is it okay if they don't know? You can also put in your multiple choice questions, you can put an answer that is I don't know. But sometimes there's just like an email address may not be required, so you don't click this. They may not have one. The next one is this question on the label? You can print some of these questions, the answers, on your patient label. So with this system, you've got a nice big shipping label sized label that you put on all your forms. And do you want this information on your label? So you can see in this example, we've got their language checked. So the patient's language will be printed on their label as it's passing through the system, so that all the professionals and the volunteers that are dealing with this patient can easily look at their forms and tell the language that they speak. The next checkbox is is it on the mobile? So that's this one. Is it on the mobile device? So the system also comes with a mobile reporting system. And do you want these statistics to show up on the mobile device? For example, in the first one, the second one, ethnicity, shows up on the mobile device. It will then, in the questions report, it will show you the counts of African Americans, the counts of Asians, the counts of so on and so forth. So, or the next one by language, the counts of English speakers, Spanish speakers, Mandarin speakers, and so on. So do you want that, there are statistics on that question to show up in the mobile device? The next question here is patient ID, PAT ID. That means, is this patient identifiable information? And we use that in some cases in some reports. If you're going to export something and send it to a research group, you may be working with a university or some other research partner, and they are going to do some research on your patient population. If you check this box, we know not to export that particular question, that it's patient identifiable. The next question is this searchable? In rare cases, some of these questions you may want to be text searchable. So for example, we've got email checked there as searchable. And so you see the searchable thing here, and you see it's checked for email. Well, then you can do a text search of their email address. Normally you're not doing a text search of their language or their, that kind of stuff. So there's other ways to find people by these questions. The next section is a registration page section. So when you're registering a patient, there are 4 sections to the questions that is asked to a patient when they register. There's a patient identity section, so that's their name and their a few things about them. And then there's a mailing address section, there's a healthcare history section, and there's a research section. So you decide where on the page the questions will show up that you enter here. So you can see the email address is on the patient ID section. And let's see. The mailing address section is for the language is going to go in the mailing address section. The healthcare history section is in general health question. So this gives you an idea of where on the page. The next one is the sort order. So with the questions that you enter, what order do you want them to be on the page? So it gives you the ability to really define how the page looks. The next one here, the registration question, reg question section here, column. How's it going to appear? How is the question going to appear on the page? For example, the first one just says email. The third one says preferred language. And then the type of question, is it just a text entry? Is it a drop-down list? Is it a radio button list? You see here we've got a radio button list for the military status. That is similar to a drop-down, of course, except that all the options show on the page. And then the registration explanation. This is also next to the question so that you can see a little more information on what the question is. Now, if you need to edit the question, let's edit general health. You just click on edit, and you can change any of the values that we just talked about. Show is this patient information, patient identifiable information. And then you can see where you've defined the drop-down list. So you can insert a new one. Let's say the new answer, and let's call this one what are we talking about here? We're talking about their general health, and then and we'll put that at the end of the list. And the label wording we don't care about. We're not going to put it on the label, but we could, and so on. So then we update that, and it will show not so good on the thing when they've got the drop-down list. And you can also delete that. All right, so that's how you define the questions. Now the way they show up, let's look at an example of where they show up. So let's just grab a sample patient here. This section here at the top, let's highlight that. So this section right here is really the patient identifiable section. So if you select a question, it's going to go in here. You can see that the email and the ethnicity questions came out here. Now the mailing address section, that's this section here. And the healthcare overview section is, of course, this section right here. We had 2 questions there. We had general health status. And then what we call the research section is this section right here. This one right here is an example of the radio box. You see how the radio box looks a little bit different. It's got all the answers right away just displayed, but on most of them you have to click and it's a drop-down list. On a radio box you can only select one, but you see all the answers there. All right, so that's how you position them. As you saw before, you can control the order of your questions and where on the page they show up. All right, so that's the patient question process.